Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good. Alrighty. Okay, so before we get started today, do you have any questions about our discussion on Tuesday?
No, I don't.
Okay, okay.
So, when we do our bibliographies, like when we do the three sites, like is it just three different articles? Pretty much is what you're saying, like we do with
Yeah,
that. Okay.
so it'll be three different articles or um, blogs or peer-reviewed articles or I mean whatever source, and then the way the pattern is going to go, you're going to have like annotated here. I'll pull up a Word document and kind of show you the pattern. Blank document. There is Zoom. Gosh, there it is. Okay. Share. Okay, can you see my blank document?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is going to be annotated bibliography. You're going to double space it. And then let's pretend like this is my citation.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so this is all that information. I'm going to, of course, do the formatting like that, right? Then beneath here, I'm going to do the summary, assessment, and then I'm going to connect it, the relevance, okay? Connect it to my paper. Then I'm going to do the next citation. Right? Same thing, put it in the correct format. And then I'm going to do summary, assessment, relevance. Do you see the pattern here?
Right, yeah.
Okay, so you should have three of these, 1, 2, and then a third entry. But this is the pattern in which should go. And this should be alphabetized. Okay, so let's say this is Wilson. Okay, because the author is going to be your first piece in that citation, more than likely. So those should always be alphabetized. And if there's no author and it's only an article title, first of all, that's probably not a very strong resource, but let's just, for the sake of example, you would still alphabetize it accordingly. Does that help, Matthew?
Yes, ma'am, it does. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, okay. Let's get started. Okay. So as you are starting to find these resources, what is going on right now in the world of the news?
A lot of different things.
A lot of different things. Okay. What kind of things right now?
Uh, I don't know. I watched that Tucker Carlson interview with Vladimir Putin. That was kind of crazy.
Okay.
Ago, but he's talking about, America's not doing too good. America needs to worry about America and blah blah blah.
Okay. Good. So we're lots of international
Yeah,
relationships, policies. Um, Tucker Carlson is he in himself a contradiction for so many people, right? Lots of
right.
different conversations around him. We've got elections coming up, right? Elections are getting ready to get started. A lot of conversations surrounding that. unfortunate realities of what just happened with the Super Bowl parade. And again, it's not just an isolated incident, it turns into a political conversation, right? So here's the reality of our world, okay? Our cell phones enable us to get quick news, quick media, quick assumptions, quick thoughts. And we learned through different seasons of war, through COVID, is the news we receive always accurate?
No.
Not always, no.
No, not always, right? And then even when we are receiving what I would call better news or news that can be checked or validated, what's the problem with it in today's culture?
Each news is like really biased toward one thing, like one issue.
That's exactly right. And really, they're even biased with political parties, right? A lot of times, depending on what channel you flip on or what newspaper you receive or what commentator you listen to, that instantly tells somebody kind of where you stand on things, right? So what I really want to talk to you today is we know that, okay? And if we know that and we acknowledge it, what do we do about it? And how can we be proactive about our role in receiving news? Because ultimately news is research, right? Even in our own jobs and in the citizens that we're going to be and the parents that we're going to be or the school board members that we're going to be. I mean, fill in the blank. There's always going to be opportunities to receive data, news, sources, and then we have a responsibility to ask ourselves, I now have this information. What am I going to do about it? So why does critical thinking matter? Critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and or evaluating information gathered from, generated by, observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. In its exemplary form, it is based on universal intellectual values that transcend subject matter divisions: clarity, accuracy, precision, consistency, relevance, sound, evidence, good reasons, depth, breadth, and fairness. Y'all, that is a mouthful, isn't it? So let's take a look at this definition right here. Applying, analyzing, synthesizing, evaluating. So you're supposed to do all these things, and that should come from a place of observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. The thing that I want to show you through this definition is critical thinking requires more of us than it does the information we receive. I'm going to say that one more time. Critical thinking requires more of us than it does the information we receive. What do you think I mean by that?
You have to form the conceptions about it and not just base it solely on what we read.
Really, really good. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we progress. So we are going to, do you want to continue? Yes. We are going to watch a TED Talk today. Don't do me dirty now. Come on. No. Hang on one second, y'all. So sorry. Okay. Let's try something else. Okay, I want you to watch this TED today. And then we're going to have a conversation about it afterwards. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can you see this?
Yes, ma'am.
You can? Great. Okay, let me share the sound. Awesome. Okay. All right, here we go.
Point in your life where you feel like you're hanging on by a thread to go and speak with a therapist. As a licensed therapist, people think that therapy is reserved solely for those who have
We have a problem. We live in a time where we have access to too much information. And when it comes to the role the media plays in sharing this information, it's important that we know who we can trust. It's important that we're able to discern fact from fiction. So how do we do that? I grew up in a household where the Today Show was on during the morning rush to school. NPR was blaring on the radio in the car, and nightly news was on during dinner prep. So, NBC family. 3 newspapers hit our doorstep each day: the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the local Examiner. 2 major magazines, Time and U.S. News and World Report. So, I like to think I grew up in an informed household. My parents loved talking about current events. And it was during these discussions that I started to recognize how issues of the day, at times, mirrored those of the past. My parents also encouraged challenging conversations with friends and family who maybe had opposing views, because they firmly believe that in order to truly understand a topic, you need to understand all points of view. So nothing was off the table. Anything from religion to politics to abortion rights to the great vaccination debate. And as I grew older, I realized I wanted to be part of the industry that was responsible for celebrating this type of conversation. I wanted to be part of the industry that provided information to the public that could then take it and learn more about a subject matter that was important to them, either as an individual or as a larger member of society. I wanted to be a journalist. So I went to school. I studied politics in undergrad and journalism in graduate school. But by the time I entered the workforce, at my dream job at 30 Rock, because NBC family, the media landscape had already dramatically changed. With the explosion of online media, anyone, anywhere in the world, could have a voice. And that was a problem, because so long as you had a point of view and a platform upon which to share it, you were part of the media consortium. And so began the erosion of the media and the role they played in our democracy. Once a destination we, as active participants, went to gain insight and knowledge on subjects that mattered to us. And so began this shift from us being active participants in this process to passive recipients of information from the information superhighway, or Autobahn, as I now refer to it. And I found this terrifying. So How did we start to shift from being active participants to passive recipients of information? You don't have to look very far. If I think about my childhood, newspaper hit the door and we read it. We knew the times that the news came on each day and we watched. And if we missed either one of those opportunities, we missed the news. That is definitely not the case today. Today, it is incredible to see how much information is available to us online. And a lot of these outlets are operating with little to no oversight when it comes to the accuracy of the information that they're sharing. You have everything from the New York Times to TMZ and everything in between. There is space for everyone.
Have heart failure with unresolved symptoms? It may be time to see the bigger picture.
And this information is coming at us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So when you think about that, when you think about the volume of the information that we're receiving and the frequency, it's no surprise that we're taking a passive stance. It's no surprise that we're going on autopilot. It's no surprise because we put a lot of our life on autopilot. We have our groceries delivered. We use Siri or Apple or Google Home or Alexa to turn on our lights, to turn off our security system, to feed our pets. I am fairly certain one of these devices is teaching my son. And when it comes to directions, don't get me started. I don't even know how I got here, thanks to Waze and maps and the navigation system in the car. We have embraced the conveniences that allow us to put parts of our life on autopilot. And maybe that's okay in some instances. But what happens when you allow that behavior to become part of how you receive information? So if you put it all together, if you think about the amount of information that we're receiving and the frequency, plus our tendency now to sort of be passive, go on autopilot, and the fact that as a society, we have a severely diminished attention span. The latest studies have us hovering at around 8 seconds. So thank you for still paying attention. When you put all of that together, it is no surprise that misinformation is flying all around. It's taking root. And the truth is lagging far behind. The misinformation is flying, and the truth is lagging behind. And it's lagging behind because we're allowing it to. We aren't taking a beat to check a fact, to dig a little bit deeper, to gain the insight that we need so that we can make an informed decision. We absolutely are not looking back to something that we heard about the day before, and we just want to check and see, is that still true? Or was there a retraction? Or was there a correction? We're just being fed information, we're digesting the information, and we move on. Another byproduct of being on autopilot is the amount of information that we share with companies. We tell them where we shop. We tell them what we purchase. We tell them where we travel, where we vacation, what we listen to, what we read, everything. And companies take this information and they start to establish a narrative of who they think we are, what we want to buy, what we want to read, where we want to go on vacation. In the case of the media, they start to create an archetype of who they think we are, what we want to hear, who we want to hear from. And because we've taken more of a passive position, we start to follow. And as we follow, we are moving further and further away from people whose views don't align with ours. And we're starting to sit in these echo chambers where we're only hearing from and speaking to like-minded people. And what's happening is they're contributing to the polarization of our society. So let me ask you a question. Do you think that Fox News speaks to a certain type of viewer? And do you think that MSNBC speaks to a certain type of viewer? Do you think they speak to the same viewer? Now, I'm going to make an assumption that you don't. And how interesting is that? That two major news networks responsible for providing us, the public, with information we need to make informed decisions on, at times, the same topic, have little to no overlap when it comes to their viewers. And this is what happens when the media starts to tailor information to a specific audience. But let's bring this conversation forward. Let's talk about something more current. Let's talk about COVID-19. There has been no shortage of information on this subject matter, from severe downplaying early on to seemingly end of days. It's run the gamut, and it has been on every minute of every day. And the information is all over the place. You can't discern the fact from the fiction. The misinformation is flying around. And as a result, we as a society are unable to agree on a path forward, to mask or not to mask, to open or to remain closed, to go back in school in person and to go to sports, or to remain virtual and to postpone. So as I was working on this talk and thinking about this point in particular, I asked my husband a question. And it's important that you know that I consider my husband to be a very informed person. He is a voracious reader. He stays current on events every day. And he loves his podcast, a range of podcasts. So I asked him, why do you wear a mask? And he looked at me like I was crazy and said, because Dr. Fauci said so. Okay. And when Dr. Fauci said so, what did you then do to learn more about why you should wear a mask? Did you learn anything about the particles? Did you learn anything more about COVID-19? What did you do to learn more about the subject so that you could make an informed decision around wearing a mask? And he looked at me. He said, Dr. Fauci said so. And it's funny because maybe that's okay. Maybe it's okay that the foremost knowledgeable person on this subject said so. But it doesn't change the fact that my husband, my informed husband, didn't do due diligence. He followed the information. He was fed information from an outlet that he listens to, and he acted accordingly. He was not a critical thinker in the process. And so maybe it's okay. In this instance, maybe it's all right. It's Dr. Fauci. Except I would argue, I'm not sure we have the luxury for it to be okay because of the time in which we live. Misinformation is all around, and that's not new. Misinformation has been around since the beginning of time. We are the consumers of the media. And at some point in time, we abdicated our responsibility to be critical thinkers in the process. We stopped checking facts. We stopped digging deeper to get the information that we needed to make informed decisions, sometimes life or death decisions. We stopped having conversations. We stopped hearing from people with opposing views. We stopped being okay with disagreeing. And we need to change that. We need to get back to being the active participants in the process. We need to get back to being those critical thinkers. We need to stop the cancel culture. We need to do the work. And for me, I think it's work worth doing. Because if we don't, we're going to wake up and the erosion of our democracy won't be happening. It will have happened. We were all just on autopilot. Thank you.
Okay, so it's a lot to take in, right?
Oh, yeah.
So one of the things that I love specifically about Blake Simpson, everything she does, you really can't tell where she stands, right? Like it's really hard to piece through and decipher, like, what does she actually think about this? And I think that is super intentional, because she really doesn't want you to know. She wants you to get this understanding of thinking critically. So I want to give you a couple minutes to jot this down and share. What did you learn from Blake, or what stuck out to you as a listener? I'm going to give you a couple minutes to think about that. All right, what do you guys think? What did you learn, or what stuck out to you?
We need to stop letting the media dictate our lives so much and relying on media, how to live and become critical thinkers for ourselves rather than relying on the media to dictate it for us. And just kind of watch what you take in, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's not accurate.
Really, really good. What about you, Anthony?
I got that that misinformation can easily be spread, and that we can regard stuff that we hear on the news or from other sources as fact without delving further, just because they're widely known sources, and that can influence us to think for ourselves less.
Really, really good. And so that lends us to the next concept, about just being honest with ourselves and where we are guilty of taking part. And I love that she uses her husband as an example, because what did she call her husband? How did she describe him?
I don't know. I just remember where he said that like he listened to Dr. Fauci about the mask, and she was asking him about the mask and stuff like that.
Yes, but she described him as well informed, right? She described him as this well informed guy. And she was like, he's well informed, he's well read, he's well versed. But when she asked him about Dr. Fauci and he said, well, it's Dr. Fauci, she criticized him for that. And why is that? Why did she criticize him? Because even though she considered him well read, well versed, open minded, a great critical thinker, the reality is he was still guilty, even though Dr. Fauci at the time was the world expert on the topic. What her response was, you know what, that doesn't matter, because ultimately we are responsible to question everything, because who we deem is an expert or who we deem is the ultimate knowledge carrier, is there a chance that they're still biased and faulty?
It can be just depending on the view.
Absolutely right. Because the reality is we're all human. And so what we think, or what we think that we know, and especially if we're gathering our knowledge from various viewpoints, there can be some faultiness to that view. So I want you to consider this. Where did you get your own values and beliefs from? Do you think that those values and beliefs shape your view of the world, of news, and how you respond to the world around you? Would you say that that's true of you? What do you guys think? Do you think your values and beliefs shape the way that you view the world?
Absolutely. Growing up in like a Bible Belt state, it's way different than, because me being like in the army and going around the world and stuff and seeing a lot of different things, I've noticed that like, there are a lot of diverse around the world, and it kind of, and the way, I was raised, thinking certain things, really wasn't even true, in certain things.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, Matthew. That's really, really insightful. Anthony, what about you?
I'd say that it definitely plays a major part in your perception of the world. Like however you were brought up and what preconceptions you have about moral values and what ideals you might hold for yourself and others is definitely going to affect how you respond to your environment and perceive it.
Really, really good. I had this happen actually in a recent conversation. I have a couple of graduate degrees, and so it's often assumed that I have strong values about education, right? You would assume someone who has been to graduate school not once but twice really, really values education in general. And that is true. I do value education. But in this conversation, someone said, there's some people that like they don't go to college, or they only get these 2-year degrees and blah, 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 blah. And it was so funny to me because my dad only has a 2-year degree. And I say the word only so loosely because he is one of the most successful business owners that I know. He's an equine scientist. He pioneered a lot of things with large animal veterinarian studies. And he teaches veterinarians all up and down the East Coast at Texas A&M, Cornell. But again, it was this person talking came from a family that they were all educated. They had all received 4-year degrees, most of them graduate degrees. And so what was their perspective about the 2-year degree?
That it wasn't like good enough. A 2-year degree is just, bogus.
And maybe not even bogus, but that it didn't level up to a 4-year degree or a graduate degree because of their upbringing, because of their worldview, because of their experience, they made this assumption, and that's how they assessed not only me, but education in general. And because they looked at me, someone who does have a couple graduate degrees, they assumed that I fell in that same camp, right? So I say all this to say, what we have to do as critical thinkers, we are entitled to our own values, right? We are entitled to our own beliefs. Those things are true. But what we are responsible for in all of that is then going, this is what I value, and this is what I believe. But I do not have the luxury, as she says, to just listen and act. I'm required to listen and critically assess. And y'all, sometimes what that's going to look like is critically assessing something that we believe in. And that's really, really difficult, right? Matthew, you talked about growing up in the faith. I grew up in the faith, and faith is still the biggest aspect of my life. But it's been interesting as an adult to meet, learn, and walk alongside of some people that say that they share the same faith as I do, but they're also very harmful to people. And they speak from a place of a lot of hate. And so it then becomes my responsibility to critically assess and go, does this line up with what I believe, what I value, what I experienced, what I've researched? And that's really, really difficult to do, right? Because I think we all want to be trusting. I think there's a part of us as humans that want to believe what we see, what we read, what we hear. But the question is, do we have that luxury?
Right. It's kind of like I guess you could say like the King James version of the Bible, because there's like a lot of other books in the Bible that it don't have in there, like the book of Enoch and probably like the book of Judas, and talking about like probably the book of Judas probably portrays him as like, a good person, a good kind of guy, and
Interesting. That's
something
really
like
cool.
that. I mean, it's just like a different like point of view. I get what you're saying though, but it's kind of
Yeah.
like different versions and
Yeah, we have to, right? Like we have to be critical assessors. And guys, sometimes what that means, it doesn't mean that we change our beliefs, right? It doesn't mean that we change our values. For me, even though I could critically assess different things that I saw and heard, I ultimately still believe the core of what I always did. I'm just now a critical thinker about it. And it makes me not blindly listen. And I think that's true of politics. I think that's true of our news. And it must be true of us as researchers, right? We do not get the luxury of clicking on a blog and listening to what it says about healthcare. We do not get the luxury of clicking on, hey, this is a way to get purple hair. All you have to do is stomp on some grapes and stick it in your hair and voila. We don't get that luxury in this day and age. And so I want to challenge you to really ask yourself, am I a good critical thinker? And if I'm not, what do I need to do to get better at that? I'm going to point you in the direction. We're getting ready to close out for today a little early because I want you to work on this assignment. And it's really, really brief, but it's a response to today's lecture. It's not due until next Tuesday before class. So I'm going to give you plenty of time. But it says, can y'all see this, guys?
Yes.
ma'am.
Awesome. In today's lecture, we heard from Blake Simpson, who talks about our role in misinformation. I want you to take an idea she shared about her own family. Compare and contrast the reporting of 2 news articles. Explain in detail how these articles are or not examples of media bias. Discuss the impact of media bias on public opinion, and then include the links of both articles. So for example, maybe you'll find 2 articles, one from NBC and one from Fox News, about the parade and the unfortunate shooting that happened this week. I want you to look at both of them and tell me what you think. Tell me what you see. Now that we've gotten this challenge of being critical thinkers, I want you to respond in a way that shows what you've learned. It only has to be 350 words. It's very low stakes and low scale, and it's not due until Tuesday before class. And then just a friendly reminder, your annotated bibliography is due this Sunday. What questions do you have for me from today?
I'm good. I ain't got any questions.
Me neither.
Awesome. Well, I hope y'all have a great weekend. Thank you for participating so effectively, and I will see you guys on Tuesday.
All right,
Thank
see ya.
you. You have a good